you out there, and welcome back to episode 2 of Explain of Thrones, the podcast where we go through the show and explain things for anyone who wants to know about the rich world George Martin has created without reading 5,000 plus pages. I'm coming to you not live, all the way from Maine, and I have on the line here Mr. Nick Kanellis. Nick, say hello.
Hello.
Nick is Nick, why don't you remind people about your experience with Game of Thrones and everything?
I am a avid show fan. I have not read any of the books, but I have read Wikipedia bullet points because I used to like to get spoilers. But now the show's caught up, and so it's kind of anything goes.
Yeah.
But big fan.
That's the important thing.
I own a sword.
You own a sword. We're all big fans. And I'm sitting here at my camp with Jupiterion, the Black Dread, my adorable little puppy. No one else wanted to be on. We have a minimal crew. I think because Sundays are just tough days for people, you know.
No doubt.
Yeah, so hopefully later this week, since I'm on vacation up in Maine, we'll be able to record some during the evening, and I think people will be more able to do that.
Sounds good, yeah.
Yeah.
So now we got the two of us and anybody who wants to warg into your dog.
Right, exactly. Well, he's currently sleeping, so maybe he's warging into someone else. I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
he does do the he does the eyes roll back in the head thing when he sleeps.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe he's having a second life as someone else.
Yeah, maybe somewhere out there's a human being going like,
snacks. Oh. Well, knowing him, it's tennis ball. Maybe he's a tennis player. Maybe that's what he does.
Yeah.
He wargs into a tennis player.
That's how Roger Federer is so good.
Yeah, that could explain it all. Oh, man. All right. So, since the show is now on, we're going to be, for the next 6 weeks, because this will be the second episode tonight, we're going to be going through the show and kind of talking about the different book-to-show aspects, and also just talking about our general opinions on how things are going within the show. And of course, I'll make it well known right off the bat, I feel that the show is missing the point of the books, and has done so for the past couple of seasons. But I will say this. The last episode was pretty good. I didn't see anything that made me go, wait, what? Or, ugh, that's terrible.
I liked most of it.
Yeah, exactly. There were some things here and there that I think a lot of people would have complaints about, but for the most part, go ahead. I think I know what you're about to say.
I know. Yep, everyone and their mom is talking about it. I mean, obviously the Ed Sheeran thing.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. So we'll get into that, but before we go deep on episode 7.1 Dragonstone, I wanted to issue a clarification, a correction, and an addition to the pilot episode. That's right. I've been thinking about it a lot. So for those of you who listened to the pilot episode, it was our first time. We're going to clear up some of the audio issues. I think I've figured out how to get audio coming in best. So hopefully it's sounding good to you guys right now, just me and Nick. So the clarification, and this is the big one. When we started talking about how magic exists in the world and all that, I definitely said, but I feel like didn't make it as clear as possible, because I don't want to get caught up in an argument every single time we do an episode of this. I'm not saying that Game of Thrones is all real and all can be explained by science. You know, because I definitely, when I re-listened to the episode, was feeling like, man, I know I said that, but I really kind of hammered home how it could be explained by science. That's not the point I'm trying to make, that George R. R. Martin is writing science fiction and not fantasy. The point I'm trying to make is that the magic in the world of Song of Ice and Fire is more explainable by the real world. So I thought of a couple of examples, and when I say that, since I'm a crazy person, I thought of a ton of examples, but just to do a couple of quick ones. So I just started reading Lord of the Rings, actually, and that kind of made me think of this. So Treebeard, great character, right?
Yeah.
We all love the Ents. We all love that. Treebeard, though, I feel could not exist in George Martin's world. Because, first of all, how would a tree be able to talk without vocal cords and lungs and all that? Second of all, how would a tree be able to walk without roots? You know, be able to stand with just tiny feet, this massive 60 to 100 foot being made of wood, be able to walk and move without, you know, the root system that is what makes up trees. And the comparison I make is the weirwoods. You say, well, there are tree folk in Song of Ice and Fire. There are weirwoods. Well, the weirwoods can't walk, first of all. And if they are talking, which in the books, you know, both Theon and John see weirwoods that they think looks like Bran's face. So, yes, that is magic. I'm not saying there is no magic in this world. There's magic that's allowing Bran to look through these weirwoods and it takes his face. But the actual, like, talking could more conceivably be like a telepathic, psychic communication thing, you know?
Yeah, I do. I think you're right that I think he does a better or a very good job of making it seem believable, or, you know, like there's consequence, there's rules. It's not just like, I'll just explain my way out of this with magic. The magic has purpose, and you, he does enough to sort of like blend reality into the absurdity of it. So
exactly.
I agree with you.
And I think that's important to him, which is why I try and hammer it home. I really liked the example you gave on the last episode when you were saying, you know, like, it's hard. It's not easy to do in his world. It's not like Harry Potter, as we were saying, where you just swish your wand, say a few words, and all of a sudden something can fly. It feels like it takes work to make magic happen in his world.
It's like if I'm watching a basketball game and somebody makes a half-court shot, I'm blown away. But if I was watching a basketball game and every shot was a half-court shot and they all went in, I'd be like, what's going on?
Yeah, you'd be like, there's something weird here. Yeah. And another example is tying it to the show and how I kind of feel like the show is starting to miss that point, even though in the early seasons I felt like they did play up that point of that, like, is magic real or is this just a medieval world? And I feel like the turning point really came somewhere in the middle of season 4, and what made me pick it out was the season finale of season 4. Remember when Bran, Mira, and Jojen and Hodor finally get to the cave where Bloodraven is, and they get attacked by the Whites, and they come up out of the ground, and what the key difference to me was the fact that these Whites were skeletons. They weren't corpses. You know, they were skeletons with no meat on the bones. Well, never in A Song of Ice and Fire do you find skeletons moving around. It's always corpses that are moving. Because how would a skeleton be able to move without muscle and tissue and all of the things that make our bodies move?
Through mystic energy.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. That's the key difference is like the show kind of went, it's magic. You know? These are undead beings.
Yeah, I'm willing to forgive a lot, as you know. And so for me, it's like, it's probably time. They couldn't explain it. Maybe there's something, like some sort of like eternal energy that lifts the bones, and
right, or some
some
White Walker magic or something like that. Which again, I'm not saying there is no magic in the world, but isn't it more not believable, but follows the rules of reality that a creature, a corpse could be animated? You understand?
Like Frankenstein. Yeah,
exactly, like Frankenstein. Yeah, and actually, what made me think of this is while I'm up here on vacation in Maine, I brought a collection of his short stories called Dream Songs, and I started reading. I only got like 2 or 3 pages in because I'm up here at a beautiful lake, and when you start reading at the water's edge, you fall asleep real fast. But I started reading one of his books called Meat House Man, which is actually the 3rd in a trilogy called his Corpse Handler trilogy. And the story is about these, I'm not sure if it's post-apocalyptic or if it's another planet or what it is, but basically these people can control corpses using technology. They put what are called synthobrains, which are like giant computer chips, into the corpse's brains. And then the people use essentially like computers to just control these corpses to work the minds and do difficult work that a human being couldn't actually do.
And so that then they can have friends who don't just think they're creeps.
Right. Well,
why are they like, I'm working on these dead bodies?
Yeah. Well, and Meat House Man in particular starts out because, George Martin has always written disturbing tales. It starts out with the main character going to essentially a brothel where all the whores are corpses.
Oh,
isn't that messed up? And I was reading it and I was just like, oh, this is weird. But because they're like animated, they have warmth, they have no expression on their face, but their bodies actually work,
It's like, he's really just jumping right in with that one, huh?
Yeah, it was seriously in the the first or second page. And I was like, oh man, at least Game of Thrones, kind of works its way into the more disturbing aspects, but no, this one went right off the bat with it. So that's the clarification that I wanted to make. And, we went a little bit into shadow babies, but we could talk for a long time about shadow babies. And I'm not saying that's not magic. I'm saying simply that there's a more realistic explanation for it. So
certainly. So
no, go ahead.
So like this episode, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just out of the gate, Arya is Frey, right?
Right.
And it's like, on the one hand, I'm thinking, man, how is she so good at doing his voice too? And then I'm like, well, look at Frank Caliendo.
Some people are experts. Well, and that's another thing is in the books you don't really understand how the changing faces works. Arya does undergo a facial transformation, and it's a physical. They're putting a face onto her, and she's describing how she can feel them pushing the skin into her. And they have to cut her face in order to make it work. So it's almost like a mask, like some sort of living mask type of thing.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Can you explain, and/or is this even in the book? In the show, remember when like she keeps pulling all the different faces off of?
Well, and that's exactly the point I was about to make. Difference in book and show. In the book, you know, it's a physical thing, and you kind of like you metaphorically feel the weight of it. Whereas in the show, it looked like a hologram almost, you know?
Yeah.
She was just like swiping. She was like, you know, tendering. She was swiping right, and they kept on changing.
Yeah. Like, I like this face. Swipe right.
Yeah. It was so bizarre. And I feel like that's a key difference. So that's the clarification I want to make. The correction I wanted to make. And I was hoping Dave would be on because he was the one that said it, and I kind of went along with it because I feel like I had a sort of Mandela effect where mentally I remembered as we were talking about it, reading a passage that backed it up. So then I went back and looked in the books, and no such passage was in there. When he was saying that the mountain's corpse doesn't have a head.
Oh, yeah?
Remember? Well,
yeah. So does he have a head?
Well, that's the thing. So in the books, the belief that he doesn't have a head comes from the fact that Cersei sends the Dornish a giant skull that she claims is the mountain's skull. Because she is, you know, the Dornish demand justice and they want the mountain's head. Because he confessed to the rape and murder of Elia. So they asked for the mountain's head, and they are delivered a huge skull that could only be the mountain. But here's the thing. The passage, for some reason in my mind, I thought I read, was after Cersei does her walk, Sir Robert Strong, the undead mountain, he like is the one who takes her and carries her off back to safety, essentially. And for some reason, I thought I read in there, she looked into his helm and saw nothing. But that's not in the book. I don't know how I came up with that. So,
you know what also, though? Like looking into the helm and seeing nothing, that could also mean, like, seemed like he was soulless, like just dead eyes.
That's true. It could be. But like I said, that's not even in the book. So we don't even need to discuss it. But the point being... I think what that was really going on is that the mountain does still have his head. Qyburn kind of did like a Frankenstein's monster thing to either keep him alive, because we don't know if he actually died or if he kept him alive or what. So one of the sand snakes, when the Dornish receive the skull, says that like the whole point of this is that Gregor Clegane is so huge that if another individual ever shows up who is his size, Cersei will be exposed as a liar, and then no one will trust her again, and her power will be completely taken away from her if people know that she can't be trusted with anything. So what that likely is kind of a foreshadowing thing, and is what's going to happen. That it's going to be revealed that they didn't actually send the mountain's head. That's going to set the Dornish army off, and they're going to go after King's Landing.
Right. I mean, a couple things. Like, one, this is a world with giants, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just, like, have leftover giant skulls from
Bingo! That's what I was thinking. And Qyburn is a maester, so who else would have access to that?
Yeah. The fan theory that I really like that isn't happening in the show anymore, for sure. I think you even maybe told me about it for the first time, was that they, like, put Joffrey's head on the mountain.
What?
I love that theory. Did you not tell me this?
I didn't tell you that, and I'm really intrigued, and I would love to look into that theory.
There's a fan theory. I remember watching a video about it somewhere where, like, like his face looks kind of purple under the helmet, and it's like Joffrey's head.
My
she like
God.
didn't want to let him go.
That would be so funny. So he looks like the Krang's body with a tiny head on top of a giant body.
So I was really bummed when he took his helmet off, and that was not the case.
Yeah, clearly not the case. So yeah, that's the correction I wanted to make, because one of the important things about this podcast is I want to make sure like we don't screw up, you know, since we're going to be going deep on all these topics and theories and ideas. I want to make sure that anytime a mistake is made, we correct it. And lastly, I wanted to do an addition because I had simply forgotten that this didn't happen in the show, but did happen in the books. When we were talking about Cersei's prophecy. Remember, well, you haven't read the books, but we probably talked about it. But apparently, in the show, they did not issue was essentially the most important aspect of the prophecy in the books, is that after she tells her all this stuff about, like, your children, you're going to have 3 of them, they're going to die, blah, blah, blah. And then she says, you know, after everything has been taken from you, the Valonqar will choke the life...
Brother, right?
Right, will choke the life from you. And Valonqar means younger brother in High Valyrian. And that's such a huge element, because that's why Cersei hates Tyrion so much. Because she believes that Tyrion is the younger brother. And what's interesting...
But
Jaime was born second, exactly. So he's a likely thing. But Valonqar doesn't mean your younger brother. It just means younger brother. So it could be pretty much anyone. It could be Stannis. It could be Jon Snow. It could be... the list is endless. It could be Euron, you know?
Right. Yes. Now that said, this is where I'm like the same thing with the R plus L equals J. You know how people had so many different theories, like, well, maybe actually Jon Snow isn't their son, and it's like, all right, it is enough of a twist for her to be killed by Jaime. Jaime will kill her.
Yeah. I think I agree with you, too, that people, essentially, since there are so many people breaking it down and everything, that when there's an answer that seems a little too obvious, the natural reaction is, well, what else could it be? But in the back of your mind, you kind of got to remember, he wrote all this crazy stuff in there, but he's still, you know, only going a few levels on some of the main mysteries. Like, he's not going to go super deep. And that kind of brings me to another thing I wanted to mention, is just sort of where I get all these theories from, because I didn't talk about it on the first episode. You know, I've been reading A Song of Ice and Fire on Reddit all the time. One of my favorite posters and people is Brendan Beefish. I love watching the Alt-Shift X videos on YouTube. But I think the best YouTuber is Preston Jacobs. Big shout out to Preston Jacobs, because man, does he go deep. But honestly, I disagree with him a lot. Like, he's exactly what you're talking about, where, like, if something does seem kind of telegraphed, he goes so many levels deeper that it's like, wow, like, you researched that so well, and I can definitely see that being a possibility, but come on. Come on. Do you really think... Yeah. And, like, an example I would point to is, famously, the show writers, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, when they came to George Martin and said that they wanted to make the show, the story is that he said, all right, if you want to do this, you need to answer this question correctly. Who is Jon Snow's mother? Well, Preston's theory is that Jon Snow is that the R plus L actually equals Daenerys. She's the one who was born of Rhaegar and Lyanna. And that Jon Snow was born of Ned's brother, Brandon Stark, and Ashara Dane. So that would mean the correct answer would be Ashara Dane. But honestly, I don't think that D&D were able to give that answer. And that alone, to me, is evidence enough that R plus L does equal J.
Well, now in the show at least, I mean...
And that's what they made. They made it happen. Yeah. So confirmed, essentially. Yeah. Unless it would be really kind of cool and kind of like sneaky George Martin-y if they gave him that answer and he thought, they picked the obvious one. I will not tell them the truth. I will let them make the show and it will be different.
No way. I just don't think so.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Like if you're like, it's like if somebody was like, so at the end of Jurassic Park, like, what dinosaur will come save them from the raptors? Like, trick question. It was the Predator from the movie Predator.
Yeah.
Like, no, it doesn't need to be that complicated.
No, it's the T-Rex. Remember earlier when we showed the Predator once?
It's like, you didn't, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what I wanted to get out of the way before we get into the show, just with that clarification, correction, and addition. So let's get started on the show. First episode, as you already mentioned. To be honest, I liked the episode overall. I hated the cold open.
Okay.
I thought...
What did you hate about it?
I thought it was the dumbest, most fan servicey thing they could have possibly done, and I was worried for the rest of the episode that this is the direction we were going in. So to recap, it cold opens with Walder Frey saying that he has collected all the Freys that matter back at the Twins after a feast 2 weeks ago. He got them all to come back somehow. And then as he's telling them to drink up their wine and enjoy their wine, and then they all start dying because it's poison, and it was actually Arya, and she's getting revenge for the Red Wedding. Yay! That, to me, is the opposite of the message of the books. I feel like the message of the books is revenge is never worth it. It's messy, it's violent, and usually is unjust. And meanwhile, that cold open seemed to me, hey, everyone, root for revenge. Isn't revenge the greatest? Would you agree?
Okay. No, I agree. So I haven't read the books. So for me, it was just like, I will say, I was having the feelings like, revenge is great. Fuck those guys. Nice. So hearing that and hearing that that's a big theme in the book, that now then makes the later scene make even more sense. I do wish then that Arya had seemed to show a little guilt when she runs into the Lannister bannermen who are just like, oh gosh, we're so in the Ed Sheeran scene.
Yeah.
Or Sheeran? How do you say his name?
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing is that I kind of like that scene. You know?
Oh, yeah. No, the only thing I didn't like about that scene
was that
they cast a celebrity,
yes,
like a huge
cameo.
Which it's like, for me, it's kind of like, if you're gonna have a huge celebrity do like a cameo, it just kind of takes you out of the world.
It completely took me out of it. It honestly felt. I was talking the next day at work to Matt, and he said like it felt like someone comped his face into Game of Thrones. Like it was just too jarring to have that face that we all know from the real world and the modern world be in this fictional Westeros, Yeah, that was stupid. But
I don't think he did a bad job. I didn't hate the scene. I mean, it was,
No, I liked the scene, even though I feel like the scene in and of itself was essentially, maybe they realized how contradictory the opener was, and we're like, all right, we got to throw this in there, because the message of the books is certainly, like, people are people, not everyone is evil. Just because they fight for the Lannisters, like, they're probably just average dudes.
Right.
But,
like, oh gosh, golly, I hope I get to meet my son or daughter. Oh boy,
yeah,
you have some rabbit guests.
and I hope it's a girl, because I don't want to send my boy off to fight in someone else's war.
Oh boy, that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
And I mean, that is essentially where George Martin writes all of that between the lines, and uses a logical world to deliver that message. They essentially said it out loud to everyone.
Right.
So I did kind of feel like, all right, that was a little too easy, but I didn't hate the scene, and I felt like it was a good cover up for it all. But also, like, at this point, they've made Arya look like a freaking psychopath, Like, she seems to have no remorse or anything. And I feel like if George Martin was writing that story, she would have still killed them, even after all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, if you saw your dad get his head cut off,
right? Like,
that will fuck you up. And then, obviously, who knows what, she's been through God knows what, obviously.
So much. She was in Harrenhal with the Mountain torturing people.
Right. So it is like, to me, the revenge scene was like, yes, that is sweet. And the fact that they started the season with that, so I think this season is definitely going to go the opposite direction of last season. Last season, I felt like it ended with, like, everybody you like wins.
And
that's... I think this season...
Yeah, that's exactly, what my problem has been with the show as of late. After they started going off book, you're right. Especially the very last episode, but also the second to last episode. Hey, didn't you want to see this happen? Well, here it is for you.
That said, though, I think they're good enough and smart enough that they're, like, tricking us into now some more huge, horrible balls, right? Like, this season has to end with, like, I don't know, Euron Greyjoy murdering Daenerys or something. Like, something insane. You're like, what?
Yeah. No, I agree that they're aware of that. I think the whole Littlefinger thing is gonna pan out into something that you're just like, oh, damn. But, the point being, that cold open, man, it was just, because here's the other thing that's makes it so contradictory to the books. The books, yes, things happen to the characters you like that you don't want to happen to them. Mm-hmm. But it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as, hey, let's make a show where the good guy dies. Hey, let's let's make it so that, like, someone gets raped that you don't want to get raped, and like all this stuff. It's following a very, very strict logic. Everything happens for a reason. There is a consequence to every action. And if you really break it down, that opener makes no sense whatsoever. I was complaining about the ending. Remember when Arya kills Walder Frey?
With the pie and everything.
Right. Yeah. She has the pie and it has a finger sticking out of it. And she says, that was your son Lothar and Black Walder, who were like the main planners of the Red Wedding. I was like, wait, so she somehow commandeered the kitchens at the Twins long enough to bake pies with dead bodies? That doesn't make sense. I was complaining about that. Now think about what this opener is suggesting. It's suggesting she acted as Walder Frey for 2 weeks.
Right, and had to presumably write write little messages. Like, I just think about how long it takes to send 50 emails to write, like, 50 letters for Ravens. Like, everybody come. I believe it, though. I mean, I will go along with this one. You know what I mean?
You're
like,
okay with it?
Enough. I'm okay with it.
Okay,
yeah.
so then think about that. Not only did she write all the Ravens and get them all to return, apparently all of them were able to return after 2 weeks. Like, not a single male Frey was far enough away that he couldn't get back in time. There wasn't, just everything about it makes no sense. Okay, so also, there was no one else.
It's like if somebody had the party and they're like, oh man, everyone was there. Like, dude, the whole school came to this party. They didn't really. Like, there's still probably a couple Freys out there like, oh, glad I missed that invite.
But she literally said, I've collected all of the Freys that matter.
Yeah. But, maybe. There weren't that many. It's what, like 50 people there?
50 to 60 people, yeah. And they were all of the Freys that matter, and not a single one couldn't make it. But then also, think about this fact. So, not only were they all able to return, and it seemed like she killed all of them except for, a couple of, like, the women and, like, I guess serving women. There was no one else in the castle. A medieval castle has more than just the family in it. It's got tons of knights and, people who work in the castle, who run the kitchens, the farmers.
Well, I guess I figured that, like, those people were in there too. Maybe not. I don't.
It really makes no sense to me. It really feels, and that's another important point, is that, like, Martin is so accurate to medieval life. Like, people have told me, like, they can't really get into the show because it seems a bit too modern for what is supposed to be medieval. The books dwell so much on medieval life and all the hangers-on that are in places, the different kinds of horses, the different things that are required of a person to be able to live in a castle, a knight and his squire's relationship, like.
Okay, so do you think that in the book she will not poison all these people?
Oh man,
like,
that's a very good question, because.
Or is it going to be like somebody gets a letter that all of the Freys have been poisoned?
Okay,
and that's all we hear about it, because then they don't have to, like, break it down too much.
So this is actually a good segue. Arya in the books is still at the House of Black and White in Braavos. She has just been given, like, essentially her first kill. Remember a couple seasons ago when she kills that, like, insurance dude? Or when she's supposed to kill that guy, but instead she kills Meryn Trant, who shows up.
Yeah. Oysters, clams, and cockles, right?
Right.
That guy.
Yeah. Oysters, clams, cockles.
Oysters, clams, and cockles.
So she's still, like, in the middle of that. There's really no indicator that she's going to be heading back to Westeros anytime soon. Instead,
she still hasn't, like, fallen into the river. Yeah, okay.
Right. Instead, the Freys are being killed by, and for those of you out there who haven't read the books, have only watched the show, this is a big character who is not in the show at all. Lady Stoneheart. Okay. In the books, Catelyn is brought back from the dead by Thoros of Myr and is a zombie Catelyn and is just hell-bent on revenge. But she's not doing it by marching into the twins and cooking pies and somehow being able to surreptitiously poison all this wine and have everyone killed. She has joined, she's now the leader, essentially, of the Brotherhood Without Banners, the guys that the Hound is with now. She's their leader, and what they're doing is they're slowly, one by one, picking them off as they're each, like, sent out. Like, people are like, why did so-and-so not return? Like, we just sent out, that Frey and this Frey and that Frey. And so she's just hanging them. It's really crazy.
You have to love that you're like, I think that what's more believable than getting all these people together is a zombie woman killing them one by one.
A woman brought back from the dead. Well, and it's super cool. Again, there is magic in this world. This is not science fiction.
Right.
So what's super cool is like her description. They dumped her into the river after the Red Wedding, and so her body, and Thoros and Beric didn't find her until like 3 days later. So her body has already like begun to decompose a little bit. Her skin is gray. She still has the slash wound across her throat from where they killed her. And so when she does want to talk, it's actually Brienne who meets her. And when she does want to talk, she has to like push her throat together in order to make the vocal cords work. And she is clawed at her face because she was like starting to go insane and hallucinate during the Red Wedding. So she like clawed her own face and has these deep gouges in it. And yeah, it's really a terrifying thing, and it's so cool looking. But
here's another question: do you think there's any chance that she appears in the show just like way later than we all expected?
I don't, and that's why I don't think that's going to happen, and that's why I'm okay with like just giving that spoiler, because essentially for like season 4, that was the biggest spoiler that you didn't want to tell show watchers that's going to happen. And so they didn't do it then. And I read in an interview they were considering doing it later, but then they realized, like, if we do that, then when we resurrect John, it has less of a punch. If we're just resurrecting people all the time, which makes sense and stuff. But it's funny you say, like, it's weird that you think that's more realistic than Arya's killing them. But in a way, it kind of is. Not necessarily that there is a zombie, but just the manner in which she and the Brotherhood are having to kill them. They're essentially
it's more consistent with the rules of the world,
right? They're essentially using guerrilla tactics to kill them off slowly, but this is important because this ties to this key difference of in the books, revenge is bad because she's not killing the Freys who were responsible for the Red Wedding. She's killing anyone and everyone she can get her hands on. You know, and you meet her first in the epilogue of the 3rd book, which is the same one that the Red Wedding happened in. And the epilogue is from the point of view of Merritt Frey, one of the, like, you know, sons, but he's kind of like way down in the line because he's from like Walder Frey's like 3rd wife, and he's like an alcoholic, so he's describing his hangover as he's being sent out to go find this other Frey, and comes across it, and he's like trying to plead with her, like I didn't want to do it, I had not that much to do with the Red Wedding, you know, but they just kill him immediately, you know, because there is no, like, she is hell-bent on revenge. Now, what makes Lady Stoneheart's story super interesting? At the end of the 4th book, Brienne's last chapter, she's found by Lady Stoneheart. And you'd think, like, oh, that's probably like a happy reunion, you know? Last we heard, Catelyn sent off Brienne to go get Arya and Sansa. You know, like this is a good no. She's so like crazed by this, and maybe it's because she's a zombie too, that she's gonna kill Brienne. She's just
now. Does she kill Brienne in the books or not yet?
So what happens is it's left as a cliffhanger in book 4, but then you find out in book 5. She tells her. Noose or sword, essentially. And she says, you know, you were supposed to go with Jaime Lannister in order to bring my daughters back, blah, blah, blah. You clearly have not done that. So I'll give you a choice, noose or sword. And you're kind of not sure, like, does that mean I'm going to either hang you or cut your head off, like what does that even mean? And it's left a total cliffhanger because they start to hang Brienne, and it says like in that moment all she could do was say one word, and you don't even know what she said. And then in book 5, so I think I talked about it a little bit in the first episode, how book 4 follows one set of characters, book 5 follows another set of characters.
So it's like happening at the same time. We don't.
Right.
So we just aren't going anywhere.
Yeah. So, and that's why a lot of people, when they read the books, don't really like books 4 and 5, because you think after book 3, you're like, oh my God, Tywin's dead. The Red Wedding has happened. Like, I really want to see what's going to happen to all my favorite characters, Tyrion, Jon, and Dany. None of those 3 are in book 4. Book 4, and then even, I say worse to the people who are reading and want that, but to me, better, because I want more Game of Thrones at all times. Instead, he expands the cast of characters. He starts introducing people. He introduces you to Doran Martell's daughter, Arianne Martell. She's a big point of view character in book 4. He introduces you to all the Greyjoys that you haven't really met. She's not in the show at all. They completely cut her out, as they did one of my favorite characters, Victarion Greyjoy, another one of Theon's uncles. So like he adds all these people in, and like a lot of people who are reading it don't like that. They don't like the expansion of the characters. So anyways, the reason I'm going into this is because book 5 then follows the other set of characters that you didn't get in book 4. But then about 3/4 of the way through the book, he brings back some of the characters from book 4. So you get like 2 random Arya chapters in book 5. You get Cersei's walk chapter. Like, book 4 is essentially the Cersei, Jaime, and Brienne show.
Okay.
And then you spend like 700 pages not hearing from them. And then you get Cersei's walk chapter. And then you get a Jaime chapter out of the blue. And it's one of my favorite chapters because Jaime at this point is going through the Riverlands, kind of being like a arbiter after the War of the Five Kings, kind of meting out justice and trying to organize what's left of the troops and trying to deal with the people who opposed the Lannisters during the war. But he's finding that he's actually very good at diplomacy, and he's good at like getting people to kind of stop the bloodshed and deal with a new life, essentially. And so in Jaime's chapter, he's dealing with a very old familial dispute, what's essentially the Hatfields and the McCoys of Westeros, the Brackens and the Blackwoods. And then at the end of his chapter, Brienne shows up. And she tells him, Sir Jaime, I've found Arya Stark. You must come with me. And so Jaime goes off with her. But we know...
So that's the last we've seen of her.
That's the last we've seen of her. But we know...
Okay, so she does survive.
So she does survive, and presumably when she cried out that word, it was sword to go bring Jaime Lannister back here so that we can kill him.
Gotcha.
You know, and like after following Jaime's character arc of like, no, he's a good man now, you're like, I don't want Lady Stoneheart to kill him. But yet I did want revenge for the Red Wedding. So it forces you to kind of like have this internal dialogue with yourself of, why was I bloodthirsty?
Can people change?
Yeah. Can people change? Is there a better route than if someone murders your family, you murder them back?
Yeah.
So now that we've gone through the opener, let's talk about the rest of the episode.
Okay.
What was the first scene after that?
So,
Let me pull it up.
Is that when Bran comes back, when Bran gets to the wall? Is that next?
I think that was super early on. Yeah, so that was kind of cool. I like that. I like seeing... I mean,
like, if somebody was like, if I was like, how do I know? And then somebody was like, I know all these things that only you would know. I'd be like, all right.
All right.
Check out.
Come on in. Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. And I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with Bran back at the wall. And was that also when they did the like long shot of the White Walkers coming? Or was that later?
Probably.
I can't remember, but that was really cool too.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, man, wouldn't it have been cool if the teaser trailer like 6 months ago was just that shot?
Oh, that would have been pretty cool.
Wouldn't that be badass?
Yeah.
Like, I know they can't spill all the beans like that, but yeah, I really like that shot.
Oh yeah.
But
this is the shot where like you see that there's like tons of zombie giants.
Tons of zombies, right? Yeah, and giants.
Yeah.
And what looked like Woon is coming, but he was at Winterfell. Remember, Ramsay killed him? So it doesn't make sense why he'd be above the wall. And I'm sure Jon would have had him burned, but who knows?
Yeah, it's probably just like different
Random giant, yeah. Random hard home giant.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the Bran thing is really interesting because I guess he's gonna go back to Winterfell and tell Jon, like, guess what? You're not, you're not my brother. You're my cousin. And
you're Targaryen. Oh wait, does this screw you now that you're the king here?
Yeah, that whole thing. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into that. The scene with him and Sansa and stuff. And, like, this is another thing that I've kind of disliked about the show, especially the last episode of the previous season. They've completely abandoned how important succession is in medieval society.
How important what is?
Succession. Like...
Oh, like who inheritance?
Right, who inherits the next thing. Like, yeah, we all want Jon to be the king in the North. Like, that's cool because he's essentially our hero. But Sansa is sitting right next to him, and she is clearly the proper next person. Like, she's a true-born heir of Winterfell. Jon is a bastard. Jon cannot...
Also, sexism is big, too, right? I mean...
Sexism is big, but if there is a daughter and no other male lineage, then, yeah... Sansa should be the queen in the North, essentially. Yeah. And
there's an interesting, like, little power struggle between those two starting to...
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering where that's all going, because it was also a little weird during, like, the Battle of the Bastards, how she was like, you have to listen to me, you have to be smart, don't do what Ramsay wants you to do. Okay, I'll listen to you. What should I do? I don't know. That kind of upset me, and I did like...
I don't know. I guess I'll just charge my horse into all the other horses.
Yeah.
Pull my sword. Yeah.
I did like her thing about, like, I learned a lot from Cersei.
Yeah.
And something. Someone sent me an article that pointed out she actually has Cersei's haircut from the earlier seasons.
Whoa.
The, like, braid going back. Yeah, I learned a lot from her, including how to do your hair.
Braiding is hard.
I mean, yeah, she had to teach someone in the North how to do it.
So here's this is probably, like, off topic, but I was curious. As far as the thing that they debated with, like, letting
That's what kids I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, go ahead.
What would you? Who do you think is right in that situation, or do you think there is no right or wrong in that situation? Like, would you be like, kick them out, or would you be like, hey, if they pledge their loyalty to me, we're okay?
Yeah, I really like that because it was doing what Game of Thrones does best, and raising difficult questions. Because it's a very good question. Like, just because the fathers rose for this doesn't mean that the children would have done that. And a big, I'd say one of the other overarching messages of the story is that nepotism is bad. You know?
Yeah.
The fact that someone who is capable of being a great leader and their children are not necessarily the proper people to come next. And a lot of times, you know, if you're born into either royalty or in modern day America, if you're born wealthy and all that, that doesn't mean you're going to have the skills and abilities that your father had to get that for you and be able to kind of take over.
But you will have the money for it.
Yeah, you will have that. I think, though, there is no real answer as to who's right, but I think that the proper thing to do if this was the books is actually what Sansa wanted, that the family who raised their banners against you should be punished. I don't think he should kill them, but I do think he should reward the other groups that did join for him with better castles.
That's what I was thinking too. It's like, hey, help them out, and then maybe do like a Theon Greyjoy type thing where it's like, hey, these guys
them.
who were having their awards. Like, everybody wins.
Exactly.
Everybody wins.
Yeah,
There's no homeless kids.
Right. It's not their fault and all that. And think about this. So the other thing that really gets lost in the show, and I don't blame the show for this because, you know, having a ton of extras is impossible. And they don't have the time to demonstrate all the lives that are being affected, which is something the book does really well by being so long. But you need to remember, like, okay, so in medieval society, a lord has all these lands and he has knights in his service, but when he raises his banners and says, all you common folk need to come help too, you need to come fight with me, you know, we're taking, you know, all the weapons that we have and we're going to go do this. Like, they had to do it. There was no question. But still, if all of these men, like, say, for example, the Umbers, if all of these Umber men were fighting against the Starks and all that, like, their allegiance is probably still against the Starks. It's like, you know, imagine, like, a modern-day war, you know, say, like, World War II, and the Italians that were fighting with the Germans, like, they still needed to be punished for taking part in that war, you know? And so obviously, you know, you don't kill them. They lost the battle. But I think that, like we just said, the better answer would have been take all the loyal families and houses and put up new houses in those castles. You know, raise.
Also, how do you know even those kids? How do you know they're not, you know, having an Arya Stark moment right now?
Exactly.
It's like, my dad.
Yeah, exactly. Like John is just kind of like, I'm sure you're on my side now since you're young. Like, no, that's not how it works at all. Wait, say what?
Did he learn his lesson from that horrible kid that stabbed him?
Yeah, Ollie.
You know? Yeah. Ollie, that's right.
Yeah, he seriously, and I think that, I mean, hopefully the show will address it as, like, that's going to come back to bite him in the ass, because John doesn't make very good decisions. Like, he keeps on being made a leader because people like him, but he really does not make good decisions.
He makes honorable decisions, but he does not make smart decisions.
Right. Which, Sansa did point out to him. Hey, our dad got killed for making the honorable decision and not the smart decision. You need to be less like our dad.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that, too, that Sansa was essentially saying, let's be a lot smarter about this. But did you notice this? They were talking about, the Umbers, and the Umbers have Last Hearth. They were talking about the Karstarks, and the Karstarks have Carhold. They didn't say a word about the Dreadfort, the Bolton Castle.
Oh.
So, who's going to get that?
I don't know.
I felt like that should be a big thing, because the Dreadfort is the second biggest castle in the north. It's really important, and it's also a kind of crucial one strategically, because it's up a river. So that's why this didn't happen in the books, because this was really stupid. But back in season 4, when Yara goes after Theon, that's the way the Greyjoys are able to get their boats up to the Dreadfort, is because it's up a river. So yeah, the Dreadfort is super important. I don't know why they didn't bring that up.
Maybe it's just time. I don't know. All right. Speaking of the Greyjoys, I remember you telling me about the King's Moot in the books sounding epic and huge and awesome.
It's easily in my top 5 favorite chapters. Yeah.
And then in the show, it seems like 10 guys on a beach.
Yeah.
Right?
So disappointing.
So here's a little gripe I have about the show, and I obviously still love it and everything.
Yeah.
I feel like for all of these seasons of the show, it seemed like, all right, the Greyjoys, they're
they're assholes.
I don't know, let's say the 10th biggest house, maybe.
Yeah.
If that, they're kind of smallish potatoes on a relative scale.
Right.
And then now, all of a sudden, this season, it seems like, you've got half of them with Dany and half of them with Cersei, and that's enough for either side to just win everything, the way they're talking about it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the other frustrating things about the show. The book always kind of makes it clear how important population is.
Yeah.
So the Iron Islands is very small, and they're not one of the 7 kingdoms. The North is massive with landmass, but not very well populated. Then you've got the Riverlands, which is hugely populated because it's the most, there's a lot of food there, essentially.
Like the Midwest.
Right, yeah. Well, and then there's the Reach, where, the Tyrells are from, and that's even more populated because there's even more food. It's the most fertile area.
Nap Valley.
Yeah. And then, there's the Lannisters and the Westerlands, which is also hugely populated because that's kind of like California. The Riverlands, I would say, is the Ozarks.
Okay. Yeah.
The Reach, I would say, is the Midwest or maybe even the South with all the farmland.
Okay.
Then the Vale is pretty mountainous, so it's more of your Rocky Mountains area, so it's less populated. And the Crown Lands is where King's Landing is, also pretty well populated.
New York, right?
Yep, that's New York. Then there's the Stormlands, which is where the Baratheons are from, which is more what's a stormy part of the country? I guess Seattle. Yeah, it's Washington. And it's a bit less populated, but it's well populated enough that Stannis essentially had only the men from the Stormlands, and was. Is that
where Dragonstone is, or is that?
No, Dragonstone is an island off the coast, and we're going to get into that a little bit later.
Okay,
but where I was going with it, and then there's Dorne to the south, which is so different in geography from the rest of the country. It's so far south that, to me, it's like if the rest of Westeros is England and Europe, Dorne is like North Africa. It's a desert, essentially, and it's very sparsely populated, and that's a big issue, actually, in the books, is like the Dornish may be lying about how much of a force they have, but also because it's so like spread out, it's really hard to conquer, and the Targaryens were not able to conquer Dorne for over 100 years after they conquered the rest of Westeros. So the reason I'm going into all this is because the Iron Islands are essentially just, you know, a collection of rocks off the coast of the West. It's sort of like Iceland if there was like an archipelago of that. And the Iron Islanders, as a result, are very much like Vikings because it's really hard to grow food in their area.
Even like fish and pillage, right?
And even fishing is hard in their area because like they're essentially sheer cliffs. So it's like, how do you fish off of a sheer cliff? So that's why their attitude is we do not sow. In the literal, we don't sow food because we can't.
We don't farm.
But in the metaphorical, we don't contribute to society, essentially. We take everything. We, you know, go in, rape, and pillage, like you say. So the Iron Islands, though, even though it's like this, it is large enough, and they have been able to kind of survive with this way of life long enough that there are still, you know, thousands and thousands of people on it. And the Kingsmoot is such a big deal because it's a collection of all the main houses and all the main men, because essentially everyone on the Iron Islands is either what do they call them? Not serfs. They're essentially slaves. Maybe they do call them serfs. All right. I'll issue a correction later on next episode when I remember. But they have a name. Oh, thralls. That's it. The Iron Islands take slaves and they like work mines and stuff on the Iron Islands. And so they do all the dirty work, essentially. And then the actual Iron Islanders, you know, are pretty much all boat captains who are just moving around. But what's really cool in the story, and you wouldn't know it if you didn't read between the lines, but a lot of the Iron Islanders are starting to learn that they are far, far more successful being traders rather than being pillagers. And so there's almost like a division within the groups on the Iron Islands of like some want to return to the old way and just like do nothing but pillaging, which, you know, obviously the Baratheons kept them in check from doing. The Targaryens really kept them in check from doing.
And where does Euron fall on the scale? Is he a pillager or a trader? Pillage, right?
Euron is a whole nother beast. He is evil incarnate. So let's get into Euron in the books a little bit, because he's
great.
Absolutely fascinating and absolutely terrifying. So Euron was the second son after Balon. In the books, Balon, Theon's dad, you know, was the first.
Is Balon in the show or Balon's not?
Yeah. Balon's the one that, remember, Theon goes to meet him and he's a dick to him. And
got it. He's Theon's dad. You just said that. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, he's the old guy with the long hair, and
Euron shoves him off a bridge.
Right, the one that Euron killed. Yeah. So Balon is the oldest, which is why he is the, you know, essentially king of all the Iron Islands, and you know, he's the one who decided to do the rebellion 9 years before Game of Thrones take place. They call it the Greyjoy Rebellion, but some people even call it Balon's Rebellion because it was his decision, all that. Balon's the first son. Then Euron is the second oldest. Then Victarion is the third. Victarion is not in the show, and he's essentially the dumb jock of the family. He is to what the character would be if this was a football movie. He would be the linebacker or even the quarterback that is so good at football that they all need him on the team, but is so stupid that he can't do anything else. And I love him because visually he's fascinating. He wears a squid kraken helmet. He has his cloak cut to look like a kraken's tentacles, this gold cloak. And everyone else, who is a Greyjoy on ships, they don't wear plate armor because it's so heavy. But he has no fear of drowning because he's so stupid. He's not afraid of drowning, so he wears full plate armor on his ship. He wields a gigantic axe, and he's just so cool. But so stupid and like kind of evil too, because like I said, he's so good at football. In the Greyjoy life, he's so good at reaving. He can go in with his ships and just take over anything. He was the one who, how they said that he invaded Lannisport, or that Euron burned the fleets at Lannisport. In the books, it was Victarion who did that, who was like leading the charges. And so he's the third one.
So they kind of conflated the two characters in the show?
Kind of. I mean, he doesn't really have much of an aspect of Victarion. But, so then there's Aeron. Aeron is also fascinating. He's like the priest of the drowned god, but he's like borderline insane because he's been drinking salt water because they like are so into the sea that he essentially lives in the ocean. And like only eats food from the ocean, and he braids seaweed into his dreadlocks that are like down past his butt. And so
which of them has the horn that can call the dragons?
Euron.
Oh, okay.
So and then they had like some other brothers. Some of them died. So Euron is hated by all the rest for many reasons for each of them. He's hated by Aeron because he molested Aeron as a child. When you're reading Aeron's chapters, like it's not outwardly said, but he says that he feared Euron and he feared the rusted hinge of the door he would hear every night. So we have Euron, Victarion, Aeron, Balon, and they all hate Euron. And they all hate him for different reasons. Aeron, we just kind of went over. Victarion hates him because he banged Victarion's wife and got her pregnant. And Victarion then, because he's just a big, dumb brute, killed his own wife.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is the football player guy?
Yeah, this is the football player guy. So then, because of that, Balon exiled Euron and said, like, just don't come back. You mess everything up. Everyone hates you. Just don't come back, please.
And then he's like, I'm going to come back and kill you.
Well, yeah, exactly. So when you pick up on Euron, he hasn't been back to the Iron Islands in, I think it's like 6 years or something. But yeah, so it's been a while. And, there's even kind of a debate about whether he really is the one who killed Balon, because you don't know, but it's believed he did it because he comes back like right when it happens. So
right.
everyone's
In the show, you know, but the books you don't.
right. So, anyways, the whole reason I kind of went into the Greyjoys here is because, as you were saying, like, what does Euron believe? Does he like the pillaging way or does he like the trade way? He is the outsider. He is of a completely different way that some would call the evil way, where you don't really know what his motivations are. He so when he does manage to take back when he wins the Kingsmoot and manages to become the Iron Islands, he sends Victarion to go get Daenerys and says, like, I'm going to marry her and I'm going to use these dragons and all this. But it's almost like what is he doing? You know,
Yeah.
does he think he can take over all of Westeros? And then he's raiding the Shield Isles, which are down in the Reach.
Okay.
So, like, all sorts of stuff is going on with him, but you just know, like, he's evil.
Gotcha. He's like the new Ramsay, right?
Right. And I would even say he's more evil than Ramsay, more evil than Joffrey. I think that Euron in the books is horrifying. His ship, the Silence, is painted red to not show all the blood that's been spilled on it, and is crewed by mutes who have willingly cut their tongues out for Euron. How does he get people to do this?
I don't know. It would take a lot for me to cut my tongue out.
Yeah.
I can't picture myself choosing to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyways, what were you about to say?
Oh, well, so he wins the Kingsmoot by having that horn with the dragons.
Right. So
now we haven't seen that in the show, right?
Right.
So my question is, do you think it's possible that, like, the gift he promises Cersei could be that horn, or do you think that the gift will be like one of her enemies' heads?
Honestly, I think that's a very good theory. You know, that'd be a great possibility. I don't think it'll be the horn because, all right, so to catch up, show watchers only, in the books, the Kingsmoot is actually a much more contentious event. And Victarion, who I've just described, is one of the main contenders. And most people are going for him. Then Yara, Asha in the books, goes up and she gives a speech that's much better than what was in the show. In the show, she was just like, yeah, I'm going to be a great leader and we're going to make our mark on Westeros. It's like, no. In the books, she's like, so to win at the Kingsmoot, one of the things you have to do is display all the wealth that you're going to bring as king. So, like, for Victarion, it's all the stuff, because remember, when Balon invaded the north, he had Victarion go after Moat Cailin. So he's bringing all this golden stuff that he got from the north. Asha unloads these chests that are full of pine cones and turnips and all this stuff because she's saying, like, look, we wasted all this time and energy invading the north, and here's all we got for it. You know, some rocks.
Yeah, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. So, because she's of the new way, she wants to be a traitor instead. She wants to basically make peace with the Greenlanders. So, what Euron does in order to win everyone over, because remember, everyone else on the Iron Islands doesn't like Euron either. So, like, how on earth is he gonna make his case and beat Victarion or Asha? Well,
right.
He has one of his crewmen blow a dragon horn that he claims he got from old Valyria, you know, where the Targaryens are from.
Okay.
And the dragon horn somehow has some sort of magical power that makes everyone love the idea of Euron being their king. And we don't really know how it works. We don't understand it. The horn is literally called Dragonbinder. And I think one of the best theories is that, because like they kind of say like, yeah, the Targaryens would blow this in order to make their dragons subservient to them. I think one of the best theories is instead it's what makes people loyal to Targaryens.
Oh, okay.
So like because
so that's how he gets everybody to like him, but it's not that he'll be able to like control the dragons.
Right, exactly. So like I said, he sent Victarion out there with the dragon horn saying like, yeah, blow this and the dragons will like join you, but I think it's all a ruse. He knows that like it's not going to work on the dragons, but it does work on people. So,
or is he also just sending Victarion out there like, hey, will you go test the waters and then like maybe I'll go?
That's entirely possible too, because Victarion
up a little bit?
is the most easily manipulated character we get as a point of view. So,
like, all right, I'll go,
yeah, whatever. So that could be interesting. And, you know, I really did like getting to see the Greyjoy fleet. It's one of those things I was like, they have a budget.
Yeah, it looked cool.
It looked super cool. So, yeah, so that's the whole Euron thing. But what was most interesting to me, and this was something I didn't even think about and was pointed out in Preston Jacobs' video on the episode. Cersei and Jaime were talking, and they know that Daenerys is coming. They know that she's going to land on Dragonstone. And they did nothing to stop her from doing that. Like, by her landing on Dragonstone, that's exactly where Stannis had his fleet and was able to invade King's Landing from. And if you look on a map, it's very close to King's Landing. It's essentially at the mouth of the bay.
Okay.
And so they did nothing to stop her. And then Euron comes in with his fleet and would have had to sail right next to Dragonstone. Like, yeah, the geography of it doesn't really make sense. But, you know, it's the show. They're setting something up. I'm sure something's going to happen.
There's going to be an amazing battle happening. I mean, like, yeah, and maybe it's also like, they're like, we just found out she's here. Shit, now we need to do something.
Yeah, and what I kind of hope is that the gift is going to be that he's just going to destroy their fleet.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't that make sense? Like, here's the gift I brought you. But it kind of sounded like it was something like physical and tangible that he was going to give them, or like a person.
Right, like it's either going to be like, here's Tyrion, or...
Yeah, that would be a good one. Here is your little brother that you've hated and wanted the head of for so long.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also like, you know, she's been busy while Daenerys has been going to Dragonstone. Like, she had to kill all the people in that church. You know, so it's like, she's got a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah, a whole lot's going on. Yeah, the enemies to the south, to the west, to the east, to the north, which is kind of cool.
Do you think on tonight's episode there will be any big battles?
I don't think they'll show any yet. I think they're going to give us a few more episodes of building. At least I hope.
Thinking like 3 and 3? You thinking like 3 building episodes, 3 battles? Because it's only 6 episodes.
7.
Right?
7 episodes.
Oh, 7. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. They usually do a pretty good job at least, because that's the thing. I do knock the show for missing the point, but I do feel like they do a pretty good job of mixing up the action versus the slow parts. I mean, I'm such an exposition fan. Like, I would take every episode being slow.
Yeah.
But I don't think there will be a big battle in this episode. I do think there will probably be a big action sequence.
I hope so. Yeah, they got to do at least one. I mean, the seasons are so short, and there's so much to do.
Yeah, there really are.
What did you think of the So like
Sam at Old Town.
Soup.
I was gonna say the last big thing for us to discuss, and then we should probably wrap this up. We're getting near an hour and a half.
Yeah. We're as long as the book.
Yeah, right. I really liked just seeing Old Town, but man, they could have done so much better. Why did they not show him like taking classes? Because that's what he should be doing. Like, he's not just doing grunt work. In the books, Sam is starting to become a maester. Like, he should be meeting with, professional maesters. He should be learning things. Instead, they made it seem like, oh, when you're a novice, they make you do nothing but servant's work.
Just clean up poop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Lots of poop. And it was kind of like Stomp with that editing. And not only that, like, remember, Sam was the assistant to Maester Aemon, so he's already done a lot of dirty work. Like, they made it seem like he's never done work like that in his life. He's done a lot like that.
Yeah.
And him talking with the other Maester, which some people were saying is Maester Marwyn. It wasn't Maester Marwyn at all. Maester Marwyn he's a big character in the books. He's called Marwyn the Mage. He's the one that like uses the glass candles that I was telling you about.
Oh, so like
yeah. And here's a cool little thing that I picked up on my reread. In book 1, when Daenerys, remember how what was her name? Miri Mazdor, the lady who she like saves and says will help Khal Drogo and will birth your child and all that, but ends
I remember her, yeah.
In the books, she says she studied under Maester Marwyn.
Interesting.
How interesting is that?
So
we'll do an entire episode on Maester Marwyn.
Okay.
We'll loop back to it, because the important thing is that it wasn't him like some people thought it was. Instead, Slughorn from Harry Potter was Maester Ebros, who is mentioned in the books. I don't really remember him having a big part. But wasn't it kind of weird how they essentially made him a like climate change skeptic?
Yeah. I was a little like, okay.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And I kind of didn't like that they implied that if you're a skeptic, which I personally am, I require you to show me evidence in order for me to believe you.
A skeptic in general, or
in general, not on climate change.
Okay. Yeah,
I think climate change, the science is settled on, is definitely happening and is man-made. No, I'm not a skeptic on that.
Yeah, okay.
And that's what I'm saying. I didn't like that the book kind of...
Scared me for a second. I was like, whoa,
so let's have a global warming podcast. No. Not at all. No. But that's what I'm saying kind of upset me, is that they conflated the two. Remember how he was saying, like you should question everything, and then he was like a climate change skeptic. And it was like, I get that you want to use modern things in the story, but you're conflating two totally different things. Like, yeah, it is good to question everything. And what did he say? He said, like, what we teach you here at the Citadel is to, not take anything at face value. And Sam is like, well, I saw the White Walkers.
Yeah. So all of my senses agree this is happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, why is Jorah there by choice or by...
That was weird. I don't know. I don't know what that was about.
Try to find a cure,
that's what Daenerys told him to go do. Don't come back until you found a cure. So I guess he's there by choice. And I think we need to leave on that note, because everyone is ready for dinner. And
sounds good.
I have to go, but Nick, we'll be in touch about the next episode. I want to thank you so much for being my sole guest.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, and let's go ahead with the worst sign-off ever, from our throne to yours. This is Explain of Thrones.